Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the T.chelle Show. I am your host, Torrance Marchil. I hope everyone is doing well today. I know that I am. And today we're going to talk about something a little light. Last week might have been a little heavy for some people. So I want to give you guys a breather a little bit. But what we're talking about today, I think, is still very important. And that is transitional seasons. Now, this is something I've wanted to talk about for at least like 8 months, maybe a little bit more. But since then, I feel like I have had multiple transitional seasons, and they're all a bit different than I originally thought that they would be. And so, when I had my first one, I thought the transitional season was literally me going from my wilderness to my promised land. But it wasn't. It was still important. I can't even tell you what it was about. I forgot. That was like 8 months ago. But yeah, I had one. And so I do remember being in the mindset of like, once this transitional season is over, we're walking into the new. And saying weird because I remember thinking that about myself and others. But I remember just being prepared for newness. And I wasn't necessarily wrong. It just didn't look like how I thought it would look. Each transitional season I've been through, I've definitely been new after, but I'm learning that transitional seasons can just be a transition in the spirit. It doesn't always have to be this huge display in the physical. And so, what are transitional seasons? Let's start there. My opinion is transitional seasons is just a season or a phase in between two other seasons where work is done. And it could be deep work. It can be light work. It could be surface level. It could be whatever God requires it to be at that time. And I'm definitely going through one now at the time I'm recording this anyway. And I realized that each transitional season I've been through up until this point has served its purpose. So my first one that I can remember, like earlier this year, not 8 months ago, but like earlier this year, it was me coming out of my wilderness, spiritually speaking. And I just felt like I needed to reach a point before he lifted certain things off of me. And so when he lifted things off of me, I could feel it spiritually. And so in that time period, I felt a change of not really heart, but definitely my mind. It's a breaking of some sorts, and it's really just renewing your mind to where he wants it to be at. That's what really happens during these transitional seasons. It's just a renewing of your mind, pertaining to usually what's next. That transitional season was just about me being broken to a certain point and just accepting that life is just full of certain things, and you get one side of life at some point, you get the other side of life at some point, but you don't always know when you're in a transitional season either. And because the one that I'm in now, I had to realize I was in it. Like I could feel something different spiritually. And I really just think that's due to deep deliverance. But even still, that could still apply to all of you, after you've been delivered from anything. A transformation still takes place, usually before and after said deliverance, because your mind has to change. And so in my case, I know that everything that God has for me, I can't walk into it the same person. And so, he dealt with all the spiritual stuff. He got rid of all the spiritual debris, but the flesh is still used to doing certain things and thinking certain ways and acting certain ways. This transitional season for me personally is just a season of molding, not even in places where we haven't touched on before. I feel like a lot of the things he's doing now, we've done before, and you may experience the same thing in your walk as well, where he'll kind of retouch on certain subjects that you've already visited, but it's like you're revisiting them, but in a different way with a new lens. I felt myself shaken up a bit because I'm like, I don't know what this is. I can feel something, but I'm just not really sure what this is called or what I'm supposed to be doing here. But I know it was just a season of change. And what he does sometimes, with me anyway, and probably all of you, is he'll align me with someone in one way, shape, or form that is similarly situated. So in the same predicament. And it's like that person will say something that I'm already feeling in my spirit, but it'll act as confirmation because I'm like, okay, I know I wasn't crazy. I know I was feeling that, but I just wasn't sure. And vice versa, you could be the same for them. And it makes you feel better about it because, okay, you're like, okay, I know this is what this is now. This period of transition is just making me into the person that I need to be to sustain this thing. I'm going to speak for me personally for right now. I did just exit my wilderness spiritually a couple months ago, or several months ago at this point. Physically, like in the natural, not much has changed, right? I still argue that I'm living in the same predicament, but spiritually, I'm not in the wilderness anymore. I feel like I have arrived in promised land season spiritually, but as of right now, it hasn't manifested in the physical. God is telling me, hey, before it can manifest in the physical, we need to still refabricate you and your mind and how you operate and how you think and how you do certain things. Because if I give you that right now, you're going to struggle and you're going to really, you might even fail. You're not going to be able to uphold that. And even though you have me, some work still has to be done in you. And so he's making me the person who is responsible for said things now, so that when he does manifest it in the physical, I'm already ready. I'm already equipped. And it's not even just for just his promises for me, but it's already answered prayers that I prayed to him years ago. I just realized this not too long ago, that I'm living in answered prayer, even though it doesn't necessarily look or feel how I expected it to look or feel. I'm still living in that answered prayer. And so the only thing that needs to change is my mind, how I view it. That's what this season is with me personally. And a lot of you may be going through a similar situation with him where change is coming, and it could be good. It could be your promised land, or it could be something different. There's a bunch of different directions he could take us in this thing. You can probably discern a change, or you have been able to at some point, or you will be able to at some point, but he has to prepare you first. He has to equip you first. And this can be for, a new job, a new business, a new house. It could be for marriage. It could be for literally anything. It's a lot easier on you too if you just yield to him, because if you resist anything that happens during the transitional seasons, you're just gonna make it harder for yourself, and you're gonna prolong the process. Now, in my experience, transitional seasons are not always super hard compared to maybe other seasons like your wilderness, or pruning seasons or anything like that. But I can't say that it's always like that. Some transitional seasons may be hard, and to a certain degree, my current one is hard because I'm still fighting what my flesh is used to. I think it's just necessarily easy, but I don't think it's the hardest thing in the world to do with Christ, obviously. But there's still temptation there to resist, because he's breaking your old patterns off of you, your old things, all of that. And you have to be willing to yield and surrender to the process. And he'll lead you through it each and every day. And that's my best advice for anyone going through this, is to just take it day by day. Don't think of how long is this going to take, or when am I going to be ready, or, I'm just so ready for what's to come. Just embrace the process and surrender. Prioritize rest too. Rest when you can, but also just practice resting internally. You're going to need it. You're going to need it, because things can start to feel really uncomfortable for you. And God is God, right? So he doesn't move at a pace where he knows we're going to severely resist, right? He's going to challenge you. That's the point, in order to change and grow. But he's not going to push you too hard, too early, to where you just absolutely just abort mission. He's not going to do that. And so I find that makes it easier on me, because each new thing he wants me to do is okay, I know I'm ready for this because you're calling me to do it. I don't know, for example, the fast that I just did. That fast was so scary to me. It was so scary to me because I had never done a fast like that before, especially for that long. But I knew that, who and where I am in Christ now is able to handle that. I'm mature enough to handle that. Versus me a year ago, no, I was still like a little baby. So it's not something I could do. And so you may find yourself in a similar situation where he tells you to do something. And then that's the thing. These transitional seasons can look a bunch of different ways. Some of them might just be you just spending a lot more time with the Lord and just being renewed by his word and just spending time with him. Other times he's actually telling you things to do, what to do, how to do them. It just depends on, your calling and the season you're in and where you're at and what he wants you to do and all of that. But some of those things can seem scary because we don't think we're ready, or we may be afraid because we also know what our flesh is capable of and what we're used to. And though we may want new, we may want the thing that God is telling us to do, we don't know if we're ready yet. And honestly, you're like probably never going to be ready for anything. Anything in life, whether you want it or not, I don't feel like you're ever going to be fully ready for anything. Like, I don't feel like you're ever fully ready to be a parent. I don't feel like you're ever fully ready to be a husband or a wife. I don't feel like you're ever fully ready to do anything God tells you to do. You may have that desire, but a lot more comes with that than just what you desire. Hard work comes with these things. And so it might be that way by design because, if you were absolutely ready, you wouldn't need to lean on him for anything and call on him for anything. There's a lot of on-the-job training. And so that's kind of like what transitional seasons are. But I find that I have a level of peace in them because usually there's a bit of stillness there. So I don't feel overly pulled in one direction or another. It seems like he chooses pockets of time where I am available to him and can be available to him to go through the process with him. And you may have experienced that as well, or may experience that at some point. So it's not like in busy seasons where I am working a lot or just heavy into anything. Really, it's usually in a almost like I'm at a place of rest, but not really. There's still things happening and going around, but it's usually just in a place where I can be a little bit more introspective and spend time with him. That's what I love as well about transitional seasons. But this is just like the mental and spiritual component of transitional seasons. Sometimes there's things you have to do in the physical as well. And he'll place that on your heart. I don't want to talk too much about anything in particular, but I will know something's about to happen and he'll tell me to prepare for it. So like if he's about to move me or something, right? He will usually tell me like, okay, start downsizing, start getting rid of your belongings. Anything that's still in good condition, sell it or give it away. Don't sign up for this. Don't, he slowly but surely will tell me to detach from wherever I'm at. And I've heard other believers say the same thing where they knew they were about to move and they wanted to apply for something or they wanted to sign up for something and God told them, no, start getting ready to move. And some, it could be like months, years even before they actually move. But again, God lives outside of time and space. So it feels like that to us, but to him it's nothing. It's a command and he'll get to it when he gets to it. But there are some things you're going to have to do in the physical to get ready for some things. So for instance, if you're about to meet your husband or your wife, your spouse, God may put it on your heart suddenly to get in the gym. And this might even be a desire that you've been wanting or have had for several years and you just could not get in the gym. You just could not make it to the gym consistently. But all of a sudden, you just have this fresh burst of energy, fresh wind, like, oh, I need to start getting in the gym and I'm going to make time for it. Oh, I want to start eating really healthy. Let me replace my breakfast with like a smoothie and just, take care of my body a lot better so that I just look and feel my best. And then you're doing that for a couple months or however long. And then all of a sudden you meet your spouse and now you're in peak prime condition, ready for your spouse. Same thing with like a new job, right? You may all of a sudden have a new interest in something. You're just reading about it and doing your research. You're so fascinated by it. And then all of a sudden a job opportunity comes across your desk for the very thing that you've just taken up an interest in. I find that transitional seasons are so fascinating to me because sometimes you don't know that you're in them. Sometimes you figure out you're in them like when you're in the middle of it. If you're like me, I like to call my transitional season something. And so this one personally for me is called just molding. And it's different. I feel like he works with you a certain way when you have demonic strongholds in you and you need to be set free spiritually from some things. He deals with you differently. But then when that's gone and he's just dealing with you, the person in the bodysuit, he handles things a little bit differently. And so I just am turning into this woman who I've always wanted to be. And this really doesn't even have much to do with the promises. This just is me being me. I'm turning into the person I've always wanted to be, have always envisioned myself to be. And I think that's because the Lord put that desire in me. Maybe I always innately knew who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to carry myself, how I was supposed to carry myself in the world. But I could never get there because of those demonic strongholds and in my own flesh, in my own will. He's like, okay, the demons are gone. The demons are gone, daughter. Let's work on you now. We have to change the way that you do this and you do that. And so I'm just a lump of clay for Father. And he is just molding and shaping me how he sees fit. It's a bit uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. But it's also extremely rewarding. It also feels like it's a little strange sometimes because I think of this verse from Paul where he said, paraphrasing, but when he was a child, he did childish things. Now that he's a man, he puts away childish things, right? Basically saying, I don't act as a kid anymore, as a grown man. There were immature ways that I've had to do away with, thankfully. They didn't serve me any good. But then it's almost like when you get renewed and you're new, you go back to certain parts of yourself. You go back to who you were as a kid sometimes. And maybe that's because you were still in some way, shape, or form pure at that point in time before all of the pollutants entered the chat. That part was always supposed to stay with you as you grew older. But it's fascinating to me how, things I used to do as either a child or a teenager and things like that. I used to do them and love them. It was easy. It was like my second nature. I didn't even realize I stopped doing them as an adult. And so now that I'm made new and continuing to be made new, I go back to those things. I go back to those interests and hobbies. And it's like, I don't know. At first I was like, is this supposed to be happening, Lord? Because aren't we supposed to put away childish things? Almost like you return to yourself a little bit, but just a different version because you are an adult now with different perspective and vision because you've come out of all the darkness. So you're not naive anymore to anything. You know how to fight in war and you know how to walk in your newness as the person you were always intended to be. And so that's kind of like what my current transitional season is. I'm just returning back to parts of myself, being made new. I see things differently. And man, like when the Bible talks about, it was in Hebrews 12, because I just read this, but also just heard this from a sister. Hebrews 12 talks about putting away sins and hindrances. And the hindrances is so tricky because they're not sins. Like they can be sins, but innately it's just a thing, right? And so when you break off those hindrances, that's like another level of liberty because it's like, wow, that's not even like a demonic thing. That's just something that I need to be cognizant of moving forward. I find that so interesting that you don't know what to expect in transitional seasons. Each one is different, but the advice I give for each one is the same. And that advice is to embrace it, don't resist it, submit and surrender. It's to trust God, trust that he has your best interests at heart, trust that he knows what he's doing. That's something I've had to do. I don't want to overshare too much, but there's something that he's going to give me, and I've been wanting it for a while, but he also kept telling me not to want the thing he's going to give me. So I was like, I understand not to make an idol of it, but you keep harping. I don't want to say harping because that sounds negative, but you keep talking about not wanting, not desiring this thing, not chasing this thing, but you're going to give it to me. So I'm confused about that. So I was confused about that for a minute until he finally was able to get through to me. He was like, you can want the thing and appreciate the thing when I give it to you, but I don't want you to desire it the way that you have been, because these aren't even your desires. These are learned desires. This is not you. This is not who I made you. You're not somebody who chases after this, and you're not someone who moves because of this. And I know it's not you because you've proven that throughout life. But now all of a sudden, it's not even all of a sudden, but now you want this thing so badly. And for what? What are your reasons? What are your motives for wanting it? And so when I sat down and thought about it and looked at myself over the years, I'm like, God, you're right. That's not me. A lot of this is not me. And, when I do receive one of the bunch of things he's promised me and told me he's going to give me, I can view it with the right perspective. And that's another thing I tell you to have. Keep the right perspective in everything, right? But I can look at this thing as just a thing. It just is what it is. It's nice to have, and it's nice. It's just nice, right? But it's not what moves me. This is not me. It doesn't define me. It doesn't change me. It just is a thing. And so I'm very grateful that he sat me down and talked to me about that, because now it makes sense why he kept telling me not to desire that thing the way that I was. And so now when I get it, I'll appreciate it and be a good steward over it and do what he wants me to do with it. And so, I greatly appreciate that. And so that just goes back to, the advice that I would give you. Definitely keep the right perspective. Definitely submit and surrender. Definitely keep the right heart posture and embrace it. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Abba knows what you want and need, and he's got you. He's going to take care of you. And so with that, I will conclude today's episode. You can follow me on Instagram at the T.chelle Show and Torrance Marchil. You can also find me on all streaming services as well. Bid you adieu, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.